My body is my choice. You can't demand anything from me, Ethan stated, his voice as frigid as glacial ice. He turned his back, abandoning me in our bedroom. His words struck me like a physical blow, leaving me rooted to the spot clad in the silk nightgown I'd painstakingly selected for our 6-week anniversary. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of marriage, and my husband hadn't touched me once. I stared at him, the very ground beneath my feet seeming to tremble. Technically, his words were correct. Consent mattered. Boundaries were paramount. But something felt profoundly wrong about the way he wielded these concepts like weapons against his own wife. The Ethan who had courted me, who had whispered sweet nothings about our future, who had seemed desperate to marry me, that man had completely vanished. When Ethan's eyes met mine across the courtroom, I saw the precise moment he realized. I knew all along about his elaborate scheme. The shock etched on his face was instantly replaced by a raw, visceral panic as the full implications of his actions crashed down upon him. Your Honor, Ethan's court-appointed attorney began, his voice tight with strained formality. My client maintains his innocence and respectfully requests consideration for bail. The prosecutor's swift and decisive rose immediately. Your Honor, he stated, his tone unwavering. Mr. Caldwell presents a significant flight risk. His history demonstrates a clear pattern of fabricating false identities and engaging in fraudulent financial relationships. The government strongly urges that he be held without bail. Amanda, seated beside him, wept openly, the tears streaming down her face, a stark testament to the shattering realization that their criminal partnership was irrevocably over. The intimate phone calls, the carefully staged romantic photographs, the meticulously crafted deception that had formed the very foundation of their illicit livelihood, all of it now constituted irrefutable evidence, a damning testament to a livelihood, disturbing criminal conspiracy that would land them both behind bars for years to come. The judge's voice, devoid of any sympathy, was firm and uncompromising as he denied bail for both defendants. The evidence presented, he declared, clearly indicates a sophisticated criminal enterprise that represents a continuing and substantial threat to the community. Both defendants will remain in custody pending trial. As the bailiffs led Ethan away, his gaze locked onto mine for one final fleeting moment. His face, a mask of utter defeat and stunned disbelief, betrayed the catastrophic failure of his meticulously constructed, self-assured plan. His perfect scheme, it turned out, had been his ultimate undoing. Ethan Caldwell ultimately received a 12-year federal sentence for his role in the marriage fraud conspiracy, while Amanda received an 8-year sentence as his accomplice. The investigation revealed their audacious scheme had netted them nearly $2 million from victims across 6 states. Thankfully, the stolen funds were recovered and returned to the women they had so cruelly targeted. Their criminal enterprise finally crumbled when additional victims, inspired by my own successful pursuit of justice, came forward to share their stories of manipulation at the hands of the Caldwell siblings. He stalked out of the bedroom, leaving me alone with my confusion and a burgeoning suspicion. I made a decision that would irrevocably alter everything. Something was gravely amiss in my marriage, and I was determined to uncover the truth. Ethan's carefully cultivated reputation lay in ruins. Media coverage transformed him into a notorious figure, branded as one of the most calculating marriage predators in recent memory, ensuring that he would never again be able to exploit vulnerable women seeking genuine love and companionship. I celebrated my legal victory, quietly sharing a celebratory dinner with my sister and the close friends who had provided unwavering support throughout the grueling investigation and trial. Reflecting on my journey from a confused and heartbroken newlywed to a determined and empowered survivor, I realized that Ethan's betrayal, as deeply painful and devastating as it had been, had ultimately taught me the invaluable lesson of trusting my instincts and fiercely advocating for myself when something felt profoundly wrong. The justice I sought wasn't simply about punishing Ethan. It was about reclaiming my own power and agency, ensuring that no other woman would fall prey to his manipulative lies and calculated schemes. It was about ensuring his reign of deceit was irrevocably over. The next morning, I sat at our kitchen table, my untouched coffee growing cold as Ethan moved around the kitchen with the precision of a machine. He'd always been organized, but lately his routines had taken on an almost obsessive quality. He checked his phone incessantly, stepped outside for cryptic calls, and had developed a habit of disappearing for hours without explanation. "I'm going to visit my sister in Phoenix this weekend," I announced, carefully observing his reaction. Ethan's hand froze momentarily on his coffee mug before he nodded. "That sounds nice. How long will you be gone?" "Just the weekend." "Why will you miss me?" I asked, probing gently. He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "I'll manage." The casual dismissal of my absence shouldn't have hurt, but instead it served to confirm my suspicions. Ethan seemed relieved whenever I left the house. During our courtship, he'd hated even a day's separation due to business trips. Now he practically encouraged my absence. I studied his profile as he scrolled through his phone. Ethan was undeniably handsome, tall with thick, dark hair, and those striking green eyes that had first captivated me at a downtown coffee shop. He worked as a financial consultant, or so he claimed, though I had never met any of his colleagues or clients. When I questioned his work, he offered vague responses about confidentiality and client privacy. "My name is Isabel Crawford, and at 27 I believed I'd found my fairy tale ending when Ethan Caldwell proposed last spring in Denver, Colorado. The wedding was everything I'd ever dreamed of. A breathtaking ceremony at the prestigious Highlands Country Club, surrounded by friends and family who celebrated what they believed to be the joyous commencement of my happily ever after." "Ethan," I said carefully, "I was thinking we should see a marriage counselor. This distance between us, it's unhealthy." His head snapped up, and for a fleeting moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Panic, perhaps, or fear. But it vanished so rapidly that I questioned whether I'd even imagined it. "We don't need counseling," he said firmly. "We just need time to adjust to married life. Not everyone falls into a perfect rhythm immediately." "It's been 6 weeks," I reminded him. "6 weeks is nothing in the grand scheme of a lifetime together," he replied, but his voice sounded rehearsed, as if he'd practiced this response countless times. That afternoon, after Ethan left for what he claimed was a client meeting, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I searched through his belongings, not out of jealousy, but driven by a growing certainty that the man I married was keeping secrets from me. His home office was meticulously organized, almost suspiciously so. His desk drawers contained only standard office supplies. His filing cabinet held generic financial documents, and his computer was password protected. But just as I was about to give up, I noticed something unusual. In the trash can, partially concealed beneath other papers, was a receipt from a Las Vegas florist. The date was from 3 weeks prior, a time when Ethan claimed to be at a financial conference in Salt Lake City. The receipt was for a dozen red roses, and scrawled on the back in Ethan's handwriting was a phone number with a Nevada area code. My hands trembled as I photographed the receipt with my phone. Whatever Ethan was hiding, I was determined to find out. The man I married was living a lie, and I deserved the truth. That evening, I sat in my car outside the office building where Ethan claimed to work, observing through the lobby windows. I'd called his supposed workplace earlier, requesting to speak with Ethan Caldwell, only to be informed that no one by that name was employed there. The security guard I spoke with was apologetic but firm. He'd worked there for 5 years and had never heard of Ethan. When Ethan's car pulled into the parking lot at 6:00 p.m., I slumped lower in my seat, watching as he remained in his vehicle for several minutes, engaged in a lively phone conversation. Even from a distance, I could see his body language was drastically different from the cold, distant man he became at home. He was smiling, laughing, even gesturing enthusiastically, as if enjoying the most delightful conversation of his life. But as I stood in our bedroom that night, watching my husband's rigid back as he feigned engagement with his phone, I realized something was profoundly, devastatingly wrong. After 20 minutes, he ended the call and walked into the building, not to an office, but to the coffee shop on the ground floor. He ordered a drink and settled at a corner table, retrieving his laptop. For the next hour he appeared to be working, but something about the scene felt staged, contrived. When he finally left, he discarded what looked like fabricated paperwork and drove home. I followed at a safe distance, my mind racing. The man I married was not who he claimed to be. The question was, what was he hiding? And why had he married me? When I arrived home 10 minutes after him, Ethan was already in the shower. I seized the opportunity to examine his phone, which he'd left charging on the nightstand. It was locked, but I remembered him entering his passcode once, our wedding date. My heart pounded as I typed in the numbers, and miraculously the phone unlocked. What I found chilled me to the bone. Text messages with someone named Amanda, filled with intimate exchanges and declarations of love. Photos of Ethan with a woman I didn't recognize, both wearing wedding rings, standing in front of what appeared to be a courthouse. The most recent message sent mere hours ago read, "Missing you, baby. Can't wait to see you this weekend. This whole situation is almost over." The shower was still running when I forwarded the most incriminating photos and messages to my own phone, then carefully returned Ethan's phone to its place. My hands trembled so violently that I could barely grip my own device as I stared at the evidence of what appeared to be Ethan's double life. When Ethan emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel and humming softly, I was sitting on the bed, feigning interest in a magazine. He seemed genuinely happy for the first time in weeks, and now I understood why. He was living two lives, and apparently his life with me was the one he wanted to end. "I think I'll turn in early tonight," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Good idea," Ethan replied, and I didn't miss the palpable relief in his tone. "Sweet dreams, Isabel." As I lay in the darkness listening to his even breathing beside me, I made a decision that would shatter both our lives. Tomorrow I would contact a lawyer and discover exactly who I had married. The law office of Patricia Henley was located in downtown Denver, occupying the 15th floor of a gleaming high-rise with panoramic views of the Rocky Mountains. I had chosen Patricia specifically for her reputation in handling complex divorce cases, but as I sat across from her mahogany desk presenting the evidence I'd gathered, I realized I was dealing with something far more sinister than a simple marital breakdown. "Ethan, we're married," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "I'm your wife. I just want to understand." Isabel Patricia said, her voice grave as she examined the photos on my phone. "What you're showing me suggests potential bigamy. This isn't just grounds for divorce. This could be criminal." The word bigamy hit me like a physical blow. I had suspected an affair, perhaps even that Ethan had married me for financial gain, but the possibility that he was already married to someone else had never crossed my mind. "That's impossible," I whispered. "We have a marriage certificate. We were married by a licensed officiant at the country club. There were over 200 witnesses." Patricia nodded grimly. "Your marriage is legally valid on your end, which makes Ethan's situation extremely problematic if he's already married to someone else. Bigamy is a felony in Colorado, punishable by up to 6 years in prison." She reached for her phone. "I'm going to recommend we hire a private investigator immediately. We need to determine if this Amanda person is actually Ethan's wife, and if so, when and where they were married. If their marriage predates yours, then your marriage is void, and Ethan has committed a serious crime." Within hours, I found myself in the office of Detective David Torres, a former police officer turned private investigator who specialized in marriage fraud cases. He was a compact man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a direct manner that immediately put me at ease. "I've seen cases like this before," he said, making notes as I recounted my story. "The pattern is usually the same. The perpetrator identifies wealthy targets, courts them, quickly rushes into marriage, and then attempts to access their finances before disappearing. The lack of intimacy is a red flag. Many of these fraudsters avoid physical contact because it complicates their exit strategy. But Ethan seemed so genuine when we were dating," I protested. "He was romantic, attentive. He seemed to really care about me." Detective Torres regarded me with a hint of sympathy. "These people are skilled manipulators, Isabel. They research their targets extensively, learn their interests, their backgrounds, their vulnerabilities. They become whoever they think you want them to be. He pulled out a contract. I need you to understand that what we might discover could be very painful. Are you prepared for the possibility that everything about your relationship was a lie? I thought about the past 6 weeks of confusion and rejection, about the cold stranger sharing my bed, about the mysterious phone calls and absences. Whatever the truth was, it couldn't be worse than the uncertainty I was currently enduring. "Why, I won't even hold your hand," he interrupted sharply, finally turning to face me. His green eyes, once so warm and full of love during our courtship, now blazed with irritation. "I told you my body belongs to me. Marriage doesn't grant you ownership. You need to respect my boundaries." "I need to know," I said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Detective Torres nodded and began outlining his investigation plan. He would start by conducting comprehensive background checks on Ethan Caldwell, searching marriage records in multiple states, and attempting to identify and locate Amanda. He would also investigate Ethan's claimed employment and financial history. "One more thing," he said, handing me a small recording device. "If Ethan makes any admissions or threats, we need them on record. Colorado is a one-party consent state, so you can legally record conversations you're a part of without his knowledge." As I left the detective's office, the small recording device felt heavy in my purse. I was about to embark on an investigation that would either save my marriage or destroy it completely. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was taking control of my situation instead of being a passive victim of Ethan's manipulations. That evening, I watched Ethan across the dinner table, scrutinizing his face for any trace of the man I thought I'd fallen in love with. He seemed relaxed, almost cheerful, making small talk about his day while I mechanically ate my pasta. Every smile, every casual comment, every moment of apparent normalcy now felt like an elaborate performance designed to deceive me. When he excused himself to take a phone call in his office, I activated the recording device and followed him, positioning myself outside the door. "I know, baby. I miss you too." Ethan's voice, tender and loving in a way I hadn't heard since our honeymoon, carried through the thin office door. "This whole situation is more complicated than I expected, but I promise it'll be over soon." I pressed closer to the door, my heart hammering as I listened to what was clearly an intimate conversation with another woman. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," Ethan continued. "She's actually making it easier by pulling away herself. I think she's planning to file for divorce, which would solve all our problems. Once the papers are signed, I can access the trust fund and transfer everything before she realizes what happened." The casual cruelty in his voice made my stomach churn. He was talking about me as if I were nothing more than a business transaction, a problem to be solved. The word boundaries felt like a stinging slap. During our 8-month courtship, Ethan had been affectionate, even romantic. He'd pull me close during movies, kiss me goodnight after dates, and hold my hand as we strolled through Washington Park. But the moment we returned from our Aspen honeymoon, a honeymoon during which he'd claimed exhaustion every single night, everything changed. "The prenup was a stroke of genius," he continued. "She was so in love she barely read it. If she files for divorce within the first year, she gets nothing, but I get half of any assets she brought into the marriage. That includes the trust fund her grandmother left her." I had to grip the doorframe to prevent myself from collapsing. The prenuptial agreement Ethan had insisted upon, claiming it would protect both our interests, was actually designed to rob me blind. He had manipulated me into signing away my own inheritance. "I love you too, Amanda," Ethan said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "Tell me about your day. How was work?" For the next 10 minutes, I listened to Ethan engage in the kind of loving, attentive conversation I had desperately craved from him. He inquired about Amanda's job as a nurse in Las Vegas, recalled details about her colleagues, and made plans for their weekend together. He was everything to her that he refused to be to me. When he finally ended the call, I crept back to the living room and deactivated the recording device, my hands shaking as I processed what I had just learned. Ethan hadn't just married me while already married to someone else. He had orchestrated an elaborate fraud designed to steal my inheritance. The prenup, his rejection of intimacy, even his encouragement of my independence, all part of a calculated plan to rob me and disappear. The next morning, while Ethan was supposedly at work, Detective Torres called with his preliminary findings. "I have good news and bad news," he said. "The bad news is that Ethan Caldwell married Amanda Wilson in Las Vegas 8 months ago, 2 months before he proposed to you. Their marriage is fully legal and documented." My worst fears were confirmed, but Detective Torres continued. "The good news is that this makes your case straightforward. Ethan committed bigamy when he married you, and the evidence you recorded last night proves intent to commit marriage fraud. We have enough to file criminal charges and void your prenup based on fraud." "What happens now?" I asked, feeling strangely calm, despite the magnitude of what I had learned. "Now we set a trap," Detective Torres said. "Based on the conversation you recorded, Ethan is planning to access your trust fund soon. We need to catch him in the act. Are you willing to let this play out a little longer to gather more evidence?" It was as if a switch had been flipped, transforming the man I married into a stranger who recoiled at my slightest approach. I thought about the man who had swept me off my feet with romantic gestures and promises of forever, who had turned out to be a criminal using me for my money, while simultaneously loving someone else. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. But beneath the pain was something harder, more determined. "Yes," I said firmly. "Let's catch this bastard." Detective Torres had been thorough in setting up surveillance, but what he discovered over the next week exceeded even his expectations. Ethan wasn't just a bigamist. He was part of a larger pattern of marriage fraud that had been ongoing for years. We've identified at least 3 other women in different states who married men matching Ethan's description. Detective Torres explained during our meeting at Patricia's office. Same methodology: whirlwind courtship, quick marriage, access to finances, then disappearance. We think Ethan and Amanda work as a team. The surveillance photos he showed me were devastating. Ethan and Amanda at dinner in Las Vegas, holding hands and laughing. Ethan entering and leaving an apartment that was clearly their shared home. Most damning of all, photos of them at a bank where Amanda waited in the car while Ethan went inside with what appeared to be financial documents. "He's been using your marriage certificate and forged documents to establish himself as your legal husband with financial institutions," Patricia explained. "The plan seems to be to drain your accounts and then file for divorce under the prenuptial agreement, claiming you were unfaithful or abandoned the marriage." "How is that possible?" I asked. "I would have noticed money missing from my accounts." Detective Torres pulled out another folder. "He's been more sophisticated than that. He's opened new accounts using your social security number and marriage certificate, then applied for lines of credit against your trust fund. He hasn't touched your existing accounts yet, because that would trigger immediate alerts. But he's created a shadow financial identity that he can drain all at once." The scope of the deception was breathtaking. Ethan had been planning this for months, possibly even before we met. Every romantic gesture, every declaration of love, every moment of apparent happiness had been calculated to manipulate me into the perfect position to be robbed. "There's something else," Detective Torres said, his expression grim. "Amanda isn't just his wife, she's his sister." "This isn't normal," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Married couples are intimate. They share a bed. They touch each other. The room spun. "What?" "Amanda Wilson was born Amanda Caldwell. They've been running marriage fraud schemes together for at least 5 years. She provides legitimacy to his operations by playing the role of the devoted wife back home while he targets wealthy women in other states." I felt physically ill. The intimate phone calls I'd overheard, the declarations of love, the romantic photos, it was all part of an incestuous criminal partnership that made my skin crawl. Patricia leaned forward. "Isabel, we have enough evidence to destroy them both. Ethan will face federal charges for mail fraud, wire fraud, bigamy, and identity theft. Amanda will be charged as an accomplice, but we need to catch them in the act of actually accessing your funds. How do we do that?" Detective Torres smiled grimly. "We give them what they want. You're going to file for divorce just as Ethan hopes, but instead of using his prenup to rob you, we're going to use it to trap him. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, playing the part of the heartbroken wife who just wanted out of the marriage. Ethan would feel confident that his plan was working and would move quickly to access the financial accounts he'd set up. Federal agents would be waiting for him. "Are you ready for this?" Patricia asked. "Once we set this in motion, there's no going back. Ethan will be arrested, and the truth about your marriage will become public record." I thought about the past 2 months of confusion and rejection, about the elaborate lies and manipulation, about the trust fund my grandmother had left me, being used as bait in a criminal scheme. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's end this charade once and for all." Normal Ethan scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You want to talk about normal? Normal is respecting your partner's choices. Normal is not pressuring someone into physical intimacy they don't want." The Denver County Courthouse was bustling with activity on the morning I filed for divorce, but I felt strangely calm as I walked up the steps with Patricia beside me. Detective Torres had positioned himself across the street, ready to alert the federal agents once Ethan took the bait. I had served Ethan with divorce papers the night before, playing the part of the devastated wife who couldn't handle the distance in our marriage any longer. His reaction had been perfect surprise, hurt, and then resigned acceptance that made my skin crawl with its falseness. "I'm sorry it's come to this," he'd said, pulling me into what I now recognized as a calculated embrace. "I know I haven't been the husband you deserved. Maybe some time apart will help us both figure out what we really want." The recording device in my pocket had captured every deceitful word. Now, as Patricia filed the paperwork that would officially dissolve my sham marriage, my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Torres. "He's moving. Entered First National Bank, downtown with Amanda. Federal agents in position." My heart pounded as I imagined Ethan finally making his move, probably feeling confident that his plan had worked perfectly. He thought he was about to walk away with my inheritance while leaving me with nothing but a fraudulent prenup and a broken heart. "It's done," Patricia said, handing me copies of the divorce filing. "According to Colorado law, he has 30 days to respond, but something tells me he won't get the chance." My phone buzzed again. "Package delivered. Both subjects in custody. You can go home, Isabel. It's over." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. The man who had manipulated and lied to me, who had planned to rob me and disappear, was finally facing the consequences of his crimes. The arraignment hearing was held 2 weeks later in federal court, and I sat in the gallery watching as Ethan and Amanda were led into the courtroom in orange jumpsuits and shackles. Ethan's confident composure had completely crumbled. His face was pale, his hands shook, and he kept looking around the courtroom like he couldn't believe where he'd ended up. The defendants, Ethan James Caldwell and Amanda Marie Caldwell, are charged with conspiracy to commit mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, and bigamy, the prosecutor announced. The government alleges that the defendants operated a criminal enterprise, targeting wealthy women for fraudulent marriages designed to steal their assets.